What's that? 786. 186. Then capital S. Capital? Yes. S, okay. And HIA. HIA. Then all capital Islam. Okay, sure. So HIA was not capital, right? Yeah. So, it's already like. Okay. Do you like this one? Yes. This one is just a number two, right? If you can just go back to this one. I just want to check what it is. If you want to talk. Yeah. Sorry, can you stick your hand on that? Oh, this one. Yeah. The small arrow beside the share. Yeah, let's share. Okay. On the last one, we can start keeping it participants. Yes, perfect. Yeah, I think that's true. You're okay. You can try changing the slides with the. And then once this one is finished, then after this, it will automatically can start with the lake neck. Yes. Good. Thank you so much. So we inshallah have to another 5 minutes. Like I don't want to keep bothering you. If you can't do the Kahoot tonight, that's fine. We already use some of the games here, and I said to announce that because you're not here, we cannot have the game of Kahoot. But if you can, inshallah, it's up to you. Whichever you feel better, inshallah, we'll go with that. And that means 5 minutes, inshallah, we'll go from there. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Mohebbi, if he wants to use a presentation, I already told him, but he can send an email to me and I can share it on Zoom so that you can all see it. Okay. Then you will be able to control it from there? Yeah, tell me that I'll go back as well. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So. Yusuf, ne kadar size bir makine yapıyorsa, yapıştırabilir. Biraz ismi. Tamam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمهون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكناه قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها واخرجنا منها هبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولهم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله وطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها ينقلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخزلها كل شيء وذللها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أزاله كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تأتي كل الشام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفى بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك وكرمك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك ولتلهمني ذكرك اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا اللهم واسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وانزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وازم فيما عندك رغبته اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وزرى أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك اللهم لا أجد للذنوب غافرا ولا لقباحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك عني اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فاضح من البلاء أقلت وكم من إثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء الجميل لست أعلو نشرت اللهم عزم البلاء وفرت بسوء حالي وقصرت بأعمالي وقددت بأغلالي وحبسني النفع بعد عملي وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها والنفس بخيانتها ومثالي يا سيدي فاسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفزعني بخفية ما اطلعت علي من سري ولا تؤجلني بالعقوبات على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شعواتي وغفلتي وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في حوائجي المالك للرؤوفا وعلي في جميع أموري التوفى إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأل كشف الزري والنظر في أمري إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي وكنت في هوى نفسي ولما ترس في من تزيني عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وسلوا على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي في ما جرى علي في قضاءك والزمني حكمك وبلاغك وقد أعطيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مزنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزنا التوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك وزري وإدخالي في ساعة من رحمتك اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة زري وفكني من شدي وثاقي يا رب ارحم زعف بدني يا رب ارحم زعف بدني يا رب ارحم زعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عزمي يا من بدا خلقي والذكر وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هب لي لابتداء كرمك وصالف بركابي يا إلهي والسيدي وربي أتراك معذب بنارك بعد توحيدك وبدا من توى علي قلب من معرفتك وليج بلسان من ذكرك واتقده زميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خازن لربوبيتك هيهات هيهات أنت أكرم من تزي من ربيت أو تبيد من أدنيت أو تشرد من هويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيت ورحمت وليت الشعر يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك الساجدة والألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقات وبشكرك مادحات ولا قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة ولا ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعات ولا جوارسات الأوطان تعبدك طاغيات وشارت باستغفارك مزنا ما كذا ذنوبك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك أنك يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب وأنت تعلم زافيا قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليلا مكثر يسير بقاء قصيرة مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة والجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عنها، لأنه لا يكون إلا غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الزيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما من نازج وأبكي، لعليم العذاب والشدة أو لطول بلائي ومدتي، فلئن سيرتني في العقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي والسيد ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وهبني يا إلهي صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي يفوق. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأزيجن إليك بين لزجيج العاملين، ولا أصرخن إليك الصراخ المستصرخين، ولا أبكين علي بكاء الفاقدين، ولا أنادي أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية على العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، ويا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم السجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أدباقها بالجرم وجريرته، وهو يزيج إليك زجيج مهمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك ورأفتك ورحمتك، أم كيف تؤلم النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يحرق لهيبها وأنت تسمع الصوت وترى مكانا، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم الصدق، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أدباقها وأنت تعلم الصدق، أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتق منها فتتركه فيها. هيهات هيهات ما ذلك ذنوبك ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عملت بالموحدين من برك وحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لا ما حكمت من تعذيب جاهديك وقضيت به من إخلاد موان لديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدس اسماك اقسمت ان تملا من الكافرين من الجنة والناس اجمعين وان تخلد في المعاندين وان تجلى ثناؤك قلت مبتدا وتتولت بإنهام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فاسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلات وفي هذه الساعات كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أزرته وكل صيحة أمرت بإثبات الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلت الشهود عليهم الجواري وكنت أنت رقيب عليهم من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظ من كل خير تنزل أو إحسان تفزل أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي والسيد ومولاي ومالك رقيب يا من بيد ناصيتي يا عليما بزري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك واسمائك أن تجعل أوقات من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورات وبختمتك موصولات وأعمالي عندك مقبولات حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في ختمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من علي مؤولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوارحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في اتصال بخدمتك حتى أسر إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسر إليك في المباردين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وادنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم من أرادني بسوء فارد ومن كادني فكد واجعل من أحسن النبي عبيدك نصيبا عندك واقرب منزلة منك وخصم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك وجل لسان بذكرك ليجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وقلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وزمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناهي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من عدائي يا سريع رضا يا سريع رضا يا سريع رضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يوما اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس مال الرجاء وسلاح البكاء يا سابقا نعم يا دافعا نقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت له وصلى الله على رسول والأئمة ميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا الفاتحة.
Thank you so much for the beautiful recitation, Uncle Habib. Now we are going to begin the game of Kahoot by Brother Taha. Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Can you hear me well, brothers?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tayyibin al-tahirin. My apologies that I wasn't able to be there in person due to my condition. Inshallah, we'll get a chance to meet. First and foremost, we convey felicitations and greetings on this beautiful occasion where we celebrate the birth anniversary of Lady Zaynab Salamullahi alayha. Inshallah, we'll begin the Kahoot shortly. So first off, we convey the felicitations and greetings to the Prophet and the household, and then extending these to the believers across the world. So we'll begin with the Kahoot, and I'll just begin it shortly. And inshallah, if we do have time, then we'll go over the ahkam regarding to najasat. So this particular Kahoot was focused on the emptying the bowels, last time the masail that we covered, I will share the code shortly. Again, this was regarding the masail pertaining to emptying one's bowel, emptying the etiquettes of the washroom. What are the wajibat? Again, it's a beautiful occasion where we celebrate the birth anniversary of Lady Zaynab Salamullahi alayha, who is known as Aqilat Bani Hashim, the wise lady from the Banu Hashim. And again, it is a significant status. And there are many beautiful titles of this lady, Zaynab Salamullahi alayha, which the Imams have given. One such title is Alima Ghayr Mu'allima, the one who is knowledgeable without being taught, without a teacher. That her nephew, Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam, given it. In the coming weeks, we'll be going over the topic of najasat, and once we've covered that, then we'll go over the mutahirat. And then after that, inshallah, we will go pertaining into salat and rulings pertaining to that. Inshallah, it'll be helpful for me. Just giving a few more seconds for our sisters and brothers to join in. So the Kahoot pin is 9327293. All right, let's begin. So there are 7 questions, I believe, pertaining to emptying to these laws, or 6 actually. So who is mukallaf? What does mukallaf mean? Who is mukallaf? So we talked about, covering one's private parts. Who is mukallaf? Is it one who is legally obliged to fulfill religious duties? Is it someone who's very old? Does mukallaf refer to a man, or does it refer to women? So what is mukallaf? So yes, alhamdulillah, most of the answers were correct. Mukallaf in Islamic terminology is of one who is legally obliged, who is baligh, who is obliged to legally fulfill religious duties. So among the rulings of covering the private parts, it was mentioned that one has to cover their private parts from the one who is mukallaf. So again, who is legally obliged to fulfill religious duties. Currently, we have the Kahoot name A1 currently in the lead, followed by the Kahoot name Memory, and followed by Kahoot name Winter. The next question, who is Mahram? So, is it someone who you cannot marry due to your relation to them? Is it someone who is najis? Is it someone who eats haram food? Or is someone who is not a Muslim? So, Mahram was another category that you would have to protect, or you would have to cover your private parts from mukallaf and mahram people. So even though, for example, for mahram, for a sister, they're not obliged to cover their head in front of their father, who's mahram to them, their brothers, who are mahram to them. But when it comes to the private parts, one has to cover their private parts from mahram as well. So someone who cannot be married to due to your relation, that is what is known as a mahram. So Kahoot name currently Memory, currently in the lead, followed by Winter, followed by A1. The next question, who is Mumayyiz? So in Islamic terminology, Mumayyiz. What does Mumayyiz mean? Who is Mumayyiz? One who can discern between right and wrong. one who has good akhlaq, good morals, one who does all his prayers, or one who gives azan for prayer? What is mumayyiz? So again, mumayyiz, alhamdulillah, most of the people answered it correctly. Mumayyiz, who is able to do tamiz, who is able to discern, who is able to differentiate between right and wrong. And these were the three people from which one has to cover their private parts. A mukallaf, a mahram, a mumayyiz. All right, so you need to cover your private parts, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Mu'mineen, that mu'min is the one who protects his private parts, his furujihim, hafidun, protects his private parts, illa ala azwajihim, except from their spouses. So next question. So Kahoot name Winter is currently in the lead. The next question, based on ihtiyat wajib, when using the toilet, what must not face the qibla? Your front, meaning your stomach and chest, your back, your private parts, or all of the above. When you're using the washroom or the toilet, what should not face the qibla? So all of them, not just that your front should not face it, even your back should not be facing it, and your private parts should also not be facing it. So all of them, none of these, neither your front, your back, or private parts should be facing the qibla when using the toilet. So we have Kahoot Winter still in the lead, followed by Memory, followed by A1. The second last question for today's Kahoot, which of the following is not a haram place to use the toilet? On a public road causing harm to pedestrians, on someone else's property without their consent, in a public bathroom, or on the grave of a believer. Which of them is not haram to use the restroom? So yes, in a public bathroom, right? If you use someone else's property without their consent, it is indeed haram. On the grave of a believer, it's also haram. On a public road that might cause harm to people, the pedestrians, the walker, passerbys, so that is haram as well. So in a public bathroom, a land that has been made mubah for this particular purpose, that has been allowed for this particular purpose, it is okay or fine to use it. One may relieve themselves on such land. So Winter currently is still in the lead. And the last question for today's Kahoot, after emptying the bladder, how many times must the private part must be washed? So that is the must be washed. Once, although more is better. Twice is required. 3 times is required, or none. You can clean it without washing it, except in certain cases. So the correct answer was once. Again, must, meaning what is wajib? It should must be at least once, washed once. But if you do it twice, that's good. And 3 times, that's even better. So washing it once is at least, is must, that's required. So for today's Kahoot, we have Kahoot named A1 on the 3rd place, Kahoot named Winter in the 2nd place, and with all the questions answered correctly, we have Kahoot named Memory currently in the lead, followed by Sakina and Ilyas. So thank you very much again, inshallah. So now, inshallah, we'll have our respected speaker address today's guidelines. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهما. بسم الله الرحمن بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك لحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وتابعا اللهم كن لوليك حجة الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. صل على محمد وآل محمد. So praise to Allah that after 2 years of pandemic, this is my first visit of IHS of this Islamic Center. So I'm very happy. Sheikh Shafiq, thank you very much for inviting us here. صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. And I would like to begin by congratulating for the birth of Hazrat Zaynab Salamullah alayha. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجها. Interesting fact about her is the date of her birth. You know, it is the 5th of the 5th of the 5th. Did you know that before? So the 5th year of the Hijrah, the 5th month of the year, and the 5th day of Jamadi al-Awwal. Muharram, Safar, Rabi al-Awwal, Rabi al-Thani, Jamadi al-Awwal. The 5th of the 5th of the 5th. This is interesting part of her birth in date, and it is very interesting to memorize. It's very good to memorize this. I hope that every grace and blessing of this majlis goes directly to her soul and increase her darajat and her level in Jannah, although she doesn't need this, but we do our task or we do our duties. The topic that I have chosen to talk about this tonight is about tarbiyah based on akhlaq. So tarbiyah based on akhlaq. So I couldn't find a good word for tarbiyah. Tarbiyah is the Arabic word, and you know comes from, the meaning means something like training, educating, but there is no good word for this in English. So in English they say just education. So tarbiyah, we mean a religious tarbiyah based on akhlaq. So the first part of this series of lectures is about the definition of akhlaq. So tonight I'm going to talk about the definition of akhlaq. What is the akhlaq mean? What does akhlaq mean in reality? So as an introduction, a proper tarbiyah is the development and growth on 3 dimensions. One of them is the system of beliefs, the other one is akhlaq, moralities, and the other one is ahkam or jurisprudence. So we need to grow in these all subjects, akhlaq, aqaid, and also ahkam. So if we want to raise our children in a good way, all of these subjects, all of these dimensions should grow simultaneously. So it is not possible to say which one is most important, which one is more important than others. So it is not true that we say that, for example, aqaid or the beliefs is important, or for example, ahkam is important. So this is like exactly this world. If you want, for example, to live properly, if you want to live healthy in this world, to have prosperity in this world, we need many components to come together in order to, for example, to have a good life. So we need drinking, we need eating, and drinking is not a replacement for eating. All of them are needed. So we need protein, we need hydrocarbons, we need everything. We need many foods together. We need, for example, a house, we need a dwelling place. We need, for example, safety. Safety is not replacement for house. We need all of them together. So in this world, we need to have a blender of all of them together in order to have a good life. We have exactly the same thing for the akhirah, for the hereafter. All of them are needed for this. So many components should come together in order to have a prosperity in hereafter. But actually, our attitude is mostly goes to find one of them and attach to this one, and also always, for example, say I found a key code for this to be successful in hereafter and go to the heaven, which is not really true. We need all of them together. We need, for example, many components are needed to bring prosperity in the akhirah, performing all wajibat obligations and abandoning all muharramat or forbiddens. We need to do all of them together. If you ask this question from some people, they may say that, for example, aqaid or belief is important. I'm pretty sure that you have heard about this. If you go to the religion, so before going to this topic, I mentioned that all of these components are needed, but from occasion to occasion, Allah and Prophet and also the Aim alayhim salam, in order to encourage people or believers or mu'mineen to do some actions, to perform some particular worship, they said that, for example, this action or this behavior is more important. So it is not a replacement of others. So they just wanted to encourage people to do that. For example, reciting Quran is very important, right? You can see that, for example, in some ahadith, the subject of reciting Quran has been highlighted a lot. It doesn't go and replace, for example, paying khums. All of them are needed. But to encourage people to perform this, Aim alayhim salam mentioned from occasion to occasion that this action is, for example, is very important, is very essential. So having this in our mind, some people actually, if you ask this question from some people, that which part is important, they may say aqaid. I'm pretty sure that you have heard about this. They said that beliefs and aqaid is important. So no doubt about this, there is no doubt that there are some essentials in aqaid. There are some essentials in aqaid that are very important. Tawheed is very important. Prophethood is very important. For example, Velayah of Aima is very important. If you go to the book of Wasailu Shia, Sheikhur Amili, the first chapter of the first volume of this, there are a bunch of ahadith about what are important in beliefs. And you can find some ahadith in this book. They say that, for example, if you don't have these beliefs, your actions, your obedience, your worship will not be accepted by Allah. They are, for example, introduction, they are mandatory in order to be in Islam, to be a Muslim, right? Otherwise, our actions are not accepted by Allah. So this is important. So no doubt about it that we have some essentials in beliefs that are very important. However, for example, the details of creation of angels, is it really comparable, for example, to the performing salat? Absolutely no. So in general, we cannot say that the beliefs in general, they are more important than, for example, than ahkam. Yes, there are some essential part of this, which is very important in order to be counted as a Muslim. Tawheed is very essential. However, some details, for example, bada and taraddud, there are some concept in adl, in justice of Allah. Yes, there are some part of the aqaid. We cannot say that, for example, understanding this topic is comparable to paying off or khums or zakat. It is not comparable. So in general, we are not able, for example, to say that aqaid is more important. Yes, we agree that there are some essential part of this, which is also important. However, in general, we cannot say that. So the same thing for akhlaq. We have the same thing for akhlaq. So if we want to, for example, to distinguish between these three zones, if you want to distinguish these three zones from each other, it is not really true because they have some overlap. Truthfulness, sadaqa, right, is part of the akhlaq. Backbiting, ghaiba, is part of the akhlaq. But if you go to the fiqh book, Makasib al-Muharrama, you can find that fuqaha in those chapters, they have talked about this topic as well. So they have overlap, right? And for sure, if you want to do something, you should believe into this as well. So all of these three subjects, all of these three realms, they have overlap to each other. So it is not really true to distinguish them together and say, yes, aqaid is very important and that's it. I just want to be Muslim and, for example, I accepted Tawheed and I don't need to pay attention to the details of my fasting, for example, salat, so on and so forth. No, it is not true. All components should come together. Although I just want to say again that we have some essentials in aqaid. They are so important. Tawheed, prophethood, wilayah of Aim alayhi salam. They are very important. Ma'ud, they are so important. However, in addition to this, other part, we cannot distinguish that which one is more important. Although we can say that ahkam after this, for example, ahkam salat, they are so important. If you go to some, actually, we have some hadiths from our prophet and Sunni, in Sunni books, we can find also this. So they say that, for example, they combine aqaid and also actions together as a pillar of Islam together, right? So yeah, I just want to, as introduction, to say that it is not possible to distinguish them together. So having said that, I go to the topic. I want to define akhlaq. What is akhlaq? Akhlaq is a word that you can find different meaning for this word in different philosophies, in different subjects, different definitions, and people misused, abused, and also properly use this in different subjects. So it's very good to understand this. I just go to Wikipedia and I found some part of this. I don't want to go to the depths of this because it takes time and it's maybe not of your interest. But as you know, we have three subjects. We have morality, we have norms, and we have ethics, right? So this is my research in internet that morality is something like akhlaq and ethics is something like qawanin or rules of the society. If I made mistake, Sheikh Shafiq, please correct me. So it's better that you come here and speak, not me. Oh, sorry for that. Thank you. And we have norms. Norms of the society is the adab, is the farhang, is the culture of the society. There are some thing that we call as a urf. Urf means norms, right? So we shouldn't distinguish, we should distinguish them together. We have norms, we have ethics, and we have moralities. Between these three, moralities is more essential because based on morality, we can, for example, construct adab or maybe norms of the society, culture, and so on and so forth. The culture of in society mostly is constructed based on morality, or even the rules of the city, the rules of the government of the, for example, governmental rules of the country. They are based on the morality. People pay attention to this fact. So morality is important because there are components to build up norms and also rules of the society. Okay, so I want to say that this is my research and my study that, for example, akhlaq cannot be defined in one simple sentence. Akhlaq can be defined in, for example, in by different statements. We have two different approaches to define one fact. One approach is just to define a concept in a sentence, right? This is one approach. For example, you can define many things. What is the definition of the car? You can define car in one, for example, sentence. But we have some concept, for example, in physics, the electric charge, right? There is no simple definition for this. It is defined based on axioms. It is defined based on some sentences. Characteristic of this is defined in different sentences, and having them together, we are able to understand what is the electrical charge. We have the same thing for akhlaq. So we define akhlaq in this way. We have, for example, 7 sentences, all talk about characteristic of akhlaq, and all together construct the definition of akhlaq. This kind of definition is called as a deductive approach, not inductive approach. There are different ways. So it is called as a axiomatic approach, right? So it is absolutely used in philosophy, in science. Some concepts are defined based on axioms, and this is my suggestion here that we define akhlaq based on this. So the first characteristic of akhlaq is fitri, right? So we just want to have 7 sentences to define akhlaq. The first one is akhlaq is based on fitra, innate introduced. Akhlaq has been introduced to our heart, right? And it is innate, it is inside of us. So fitrah means that we have some knowledge. Before we were born in this world, we have some knowledge from before. We have some knowledge rooted in our hearts, in our soul, and they are called as a fitrah, right? Akhlaq is something like that. Every person who is born, he's born with some knowledge, and one of them some ma'arifah, some recognition, we call it a fitrah. And and if you see kids at the age of 7, right, they come to the age of wisdom. At this age, they are able to distinguish what is bad, what is good, what is proper and what is improper. They are able, for example, to distinguish bad and good. In Arabic, we say tamyiz, right? They are able to distinguish between bad and good, tamyiz. This is very important. So when they reach to the age of bulugh, puberty, age of 15, 14 in boys, and for example 9 in girls, so they reach to the wisdom, and the wisdom becomes more complete compared to previous years, and they are able to accept akhlaq. They are able to accept the moral principles. They accept morality with the same wisdom that they accepted Allah. This is so important. With the same wisdom that we accepted Allah, by the same wisdom we accepted the rules and principles of akhlaq. Lying is very bad, so you don't need to teach a kid, for example, why it is bad. He can understand this. Another beauty of akhlaq is this, because it is fitri. If it is fitri, there is no need to teach. There is no need, for example, we don't need a teacher to teach us akhlaq. Although we need, for example, we need some people, we need some teachers, we need some scholars to remind us, to remove obstacles in front of us, to shed light in our minds, in our wisdom, and remove cover in front of this. We need that. But teaching this, because it is fitri, so there is no need to teacher. There is no need, for example, to teach this, and there is no need for a teacher. Akhlaq is very sweet. So akhlaq is very sweet, and by just actually very small tazakkur, very small reminder, people can realize what kind of action is based on the morality and what kind of action is not based on the morality. It's very sweet, and just by a little bit tazakkur or maybe reminder, they are able to realize this. It is fitri. So if it is fitri, right, so it is independent of religion. Even non-Muslim, they are able to realize it. It is independent of time, right? So it is not possible to say that, for example, at this time, akhlaq is this, and for example, 10 years ago, akhlaq was that, and 10 years after, akhlaq should be this. No, akhlaq is independent of time. Akhlaq is independent of cultures, traditions, skin colors, doesn't matter at all. Geographic area that we were born, it is independent of the country, nationality, races, tribes. It is independent of them. Why? Because it is fitri, and fitra is common between all of the people. Number 2, how much time I have, brother? 15 minutes more? Okay. Yes, so number 2, the criteria to realize which one is based on akhlaq or not is wisdom, is aql. Aql is the criteria to realize which one is akhlaq and which one is not from akhlaq, right? The light of wisdom must approve something to be considered as a morality or not. This is the aql. Aql is the criteria. I just wanted to highlight on this because some people say that happiness, joys, they are one that they are able to say that which one is based on akhlaq or which one is not based on akhlaq. No. Happiness, joys, and pleasure, they are not criteria for considering a thing as an akhlaq principle. No, aql is the one that can decide that decide which one is akhlaq and which one is not akhlaq. If you go to the book of the coffee, the first book of the coffee, the first volume of the coffee, it is started from Kitab al-Aql wal-Jahl. And this is very interesting because if you go to the book of Bukhari, it is started from what? From Kitab Bad al-Wahy, the beginning of the Wahy. But in Shia, they started from Aql, right? So they are different. You can see that this big difference between Shia and Sunni. The first, yes, the first chapter of the book of Kafi is about Kitab al-Aql wal-Jahl. And we have a tradition on this chapter, which is very important. It is called as the soldiers of wisdom and soldiers of ignorance. Junudul Aql wa Junudul Jahl, right? So if you go to the Junud, to the soldiers of Aql or the soldiers of Jahl, all of them are morality items. This is very interesting. Imam alayhi salam, he mentioned what is the soldiers of Aql. They are just akhlaq. They are just, for example, truthless, sadaqa. Yeah, sadaqa. For example, what amanat means? Trustworthy, trustworthy. And all of these topics that are included in this hadith, that they are all from morality. They are all morals, not, for example, something else. And Imam alayhi salam paired them. For example, you have forgiveness, and you have intiqam, revenge, as the opposite together. Revenge is the akhlaqic, is the immoral item, and or forgiveness is a moral item. They are opposite to each other, and they are considered as soldiers of aql and soldiers of jahl, right? And yes. Number 3, peace and happiness comes after performing akhlaq. This is another identity of akhlaq, another characteristic of akhlaq. If we perform one action based on akhlaq, we can feel happiness, we can feel joys and peaceful after this. We are happy from each we are happy with ourselves when we do something good, and although, for example, we may lose something, some money, but we are happy by doing a moral thing here. So conducting akhlaq brings peace to our lives. This is the loot from Allah. This is one blessing from Allah. If you want to realize which one, for example, if you want to see, this is the characteristic of akhlaq. If you do this, you feel pleasure. The reverse one is not correct. If you have pleasure, it doesn't mean that it is from akhlaq. But if you perform akhlaq, you can see pleasure and joy in your soul, in your heart. And this is another characteristic of akhlaq. On the other hand, if you perform something immoral, right? For example, do dhulm, oppression, backbiting, for example, deceiving people, you feel guilty. You feel guilty after this. This is another blessing from Allah to guide you which one. For example, are you in the right path or not? Just as the light, red and green, to show us which one is a good path. If you deceive someone, like, for example, your teacher, like your parents, like, for example, your friends, in order to achieve your desires, for example, right? Although you get what you want, right? But you don't feel happy after that. For example, you can cheat on exam and get a good mark, but after that, your heart doesn't have a good feeling after this. This is exactly the characteristic of akhlaq if you perform a moral thing. If you, for example, yell at your mother, at your father, at your husband, at your wife, right? So after some time, you can realize, no, it is not a good thing. Your mother, your father, they did a lot for you. When you were born, you know how many hours our parents, for example, didn't sleep and sat beside us, for example, to raise us, to feel comfortable, right? So it is not correct that, for example, I yell at them. It is not. It is absolutely my morality, my wisdom doesn't accept this. We have a very interesting hadith in the book of Kafi. من نظر إلى أبويه نظر ماقت وهما ظالمان له لم يقبل الله له صلاته. If someone looked by anger to his parents, although their parents are oppressing him, they are humiliating him, right? وَهُمَا ظَالِمَانِ لَهُ. No, they don't say most of the cases or parents, they are doing well. They are doing, for example, a very good job. But even in the cases that they are doing zulm, they are oppressing us. If you just look at them by anger, Imam alayhi salam said that Allah will not accept their prayers. And this hadith from the book of Kafi, the narrators of this hadith is all authentic, right? So this is a correct hadith. Yes, and for example, we have hadith in Nahj al-Balagha, al-hiddatu dharbun min al-junun. Hiddah means being angry. If you become angry, right? Al-hiddah, anger. It is dharbun min al-junun. It is some aspect of being crazy, right? So our mind is not working well. You know what is the meaning of junun? Junun comes from Jannah. Jannah means cover something. We call the baby in the body of the woman as a janeen because he's covered or she's covered, right? So we cannot see this. Jinn, we cannot see jinn. That's why Allah said jinn, right? So jinn means something which is covered. Dharbun min al junun, right? So junun, craziness. We call this craziness because our mind or wisdom is covered by something, right? So it is not working well. So this is very important. We have a very interesting hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. البر ما اطمأن به الصدر والإثم ما ترتد في الصدر وجال في القلب. البر, goodness, is something that you can feel comfortable. You become stable after this. البر ما اطمأن به الصدر, your heart becomes stable after this. But إثم, illness, for example, sins, there are those that your heart is not stable. It becomes unstable after this. So you don't feel comfortable after that. So number 4, akhlaq is common between everyone, right? Because wisdom is common between everyone. And based on this, so we are this is very important, and people knows this, and based on this they are trying to do for example, Amir al-Mu'min alayhi salam, the enemy of Amir al-Mu'min is trying to, what they have done. They wanted, for example, to show that Amir al-Mu'minin is not, for example, is not comparable, is not in a high rank after Rasulullah. So they accuse Amir al-Mu'minin of what? Of immoral thing. They just go and find something and they created something, fabricated something to say that, yes, Amir al-Mu'minin was, for example, conceit, or maybe he was, for example, selfish, something like that. They said that, in Bani Abbas at that time, Bani Umayyah at that time, they fabricated something like that. They wanted to reduce the rank, the highness of Amir al-Mu'minin by accusing him of immoral things, because they want, for example, to make enemy for him, and they are doing this. We have very interesting hadith. As I mentioned, akhlaq is common between everyone. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he has a friend, and this friend was with him for all time. And his friend, so in the hadith, we have, for example, لا يكاد يفارقه إذا ذهب مكانا. So he was always attached to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And he has a ghulam, he has, for example, he has a servant. And they went to the shoes market. So there was some market over there, some shops. There were for shopping shoes, for example, and they were there. And this person that was with Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he had a ghulam, he had a servant, and he was Sindhi. Sindhi means maybe Hindi. I don't know what is the meaning of Sindhi. Sindhi means Hindi. He was from Hind, or maybe from some part of the Africa. I don't know, Africa. He was from some other part of the world, and this person called his ghulam 3 times. He didn't answer. At the 4th time, he didn't answer, but the friend of Imam Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam called him by a bad word, right? He cursed him. Upon Imam Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam heard this, he yelled at him and said, "Why did you use this word? Why did you accuse his mother, for example? You don't know. Do you know what's wrong was your action?" And Imam alayhi salam said that, for example, why did you say that? إِنَّ لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ نِكَاحًا. So in any qawm, in any tribes, we have a rule of marriage in every rules. And for example, if they got married based on this rule, you should respect this. You shouldn't accuse them because, for example, they are not married based on Islamic rules. No, every rule لكل قوم نكاح, and you have to respect this rule. Yes, a few minutes more. The 5th part of the akhlaq is a heart-rooted. Akhlaq is heart-rooted. For example, tawazu, we say humility, right? Humility, you cannot, for example, play a role of humility. You cannot play a role as a humble person. It should be rooted in your heart. You should have this in your heart. You should accept this. If you just go and, for example, play a role as a humble person, it is not akhlaq. Another characteristic of akhlaq should be rooted in your heart in order to say that this is from akhlaq. Another characteristic is in the other way. Although akhlaq should be rooted in heart, but it is not sufficient just having in our heart. We should show them in reality. We should practice them. Akhlaq should be rooted in your heart, but should be shown also in practice. For example, if I'm humble, if I say that I'm really humble, but for example, I don't show this, right? So there is a place here. I just want to go to the very high position. I just want to have everything for myself. It is not humility. Humility means that you should show this in reality, not as a role, not as a just, for example, playing a role. No, you should in reality show this, and it should be rooted in your heart. Yes, I guess this is the topics that I have discussed today, and I would like to conclude that I have defined akhlaq based on axioms with 7 sentences, and all of them are, by having this, we are able to distinguish what is akhlaq and what is not akhlaq. And one of the things that we should go and pay attention to this is we can raise our children based on akhlaq. It's so important. We are able to attract people based on akhlaq. We are able to rooted all of the Islamic principles in their heart by doing akhlaq. And yes, this is another topic that I may talk about this maybe later on. Thank you very much. Please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلهي عزم البلاء بدي الخفاء وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وذاكت الأرض ومنيت السماء وأنت المستعان وإليك المشتكى وعليك المعول في الشدة والرخاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. كل الأمر الذين فرضت علينا طاعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر يا هو أقرب يا محمد يا علي يا علي يا محمد. اكفياني فإنكما كافيان وانصراني فإنكما ناصران يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان. الغوث 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 أدركني أدركني أدركني. السات 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 العجل 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 يا أرحم الراحمين بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. محمد زيارة إمام حسين عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا سار الله وابن ساره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مظلمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياء ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبي بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. جناب علي أكبر عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت به. تمام شهداء كربلاء. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباه. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداه. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي ولي الزكي الناصف. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. جناب أبو الفضل العباس عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأخوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد أنك لقد نسخت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استخلت منك المهارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المهام الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زيد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقق الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولا وابن مولا. السلام عليك يا غريب الغربة. السلطان أبو الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا. كن شفيعنا والشفي والدي في يوم جزائي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا قامة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأوانك وشيئتك وزوارك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلى على بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك وآبائي في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الفاتحة.